All right. Welcome. It is, what is it? It's 5:14 on February 17th. This is the meeting of the Training Subcommittee of the Racial Equity and Policing Commission. My name is Dante James, and just want to welcome all the commissioners and guests who may be here. Chief Dowd, Assistant Chief Dowd, and we also have two officers who will be joining us for the duration of our work, and want to welcome them. They've been apprised of the work of the commission itself and some of the subcommittee's work. They've received the recommendations that we have put together and received approval from the full commission on. And so just want to welcome them and certainly let them know we appreciate their voice in this conversation. They're not voting members of the commission or the subcommittee, but certainly I think their voice and their experience as patrol officers and leaders in their department can make a difference, at least in informing how we think about what we do. So I would just like to invite Officer Norgard, and I apologize, I don't have your bios in front of me, so your rank might not be correct as I stated. So Officer Norgard and Officer Munoz, certainly welcome you to offer some thoughts and maybe give a little bit about why you're interested in the Racial Equity and Policing Commission generally and the Training Subcommittee specifically. There's Commissioner Prospero, welcome, right on time. So why don't we start with Officer Norgard, since I see your face.
Well, basically what I was hoping to get out of this was just, as you said, speak of my experiences and how that could help, and also just be as absolute honest about things as I possibly can with real questions that anybody may have.
Thank you, short and sweet.
Yep.
Officer Munoz.
So with me, as you have my bio already, it's more involved in the training. Since I am a field training officer, I'm also on the collateral recruiting. So it's more of my field as far as what I do.
Great. Well, thank you. And would welcome the commissioners to offer any thoughts on having the officers here as part of this subcommittee, or just any thoughts on the work that we're doing in general, or anything else you want them to know or hear from. And this is not a shy subcommittee. I'll let you know.
Hey, you know, I'm good with Bob, but that Jose Munoz, man, I don't want nothing to do with that guy. He punking me all the time, man. Just so y'all know, part of ICHAMPS hires off-duty officers to come and go to hang out with the kids for the sole purpose of just building those positive relationships, being great role models, mentors, and so forth. And Jose was one of them and did a great job. So I know Munoz. Good to meet you, Bob. Norgard, is that how you say it?
Yes, sir.
All right. Again, I'm very informal. You can call me Mo or Moises. I know other people like to use commissioner and stuff like that. I really appreciate you guys coming, spending the time. I value the input, especially of an institution that we want to provide recommendations for. So welcome. That's my input.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Other commissioners?
One of the topics we talked about in the other meeting that some of the commissioners brought up was their concern, reiteration of their concern about having officers on the commission because of the feeling of anxiety or lack of safety that they feel around law enforcement and being able to fully express themselves. I know some other commissioners have talked about that in the past and some of that anxiety, and I I express my opinion that it's extremely hard to tell an institution that has so much authority over you or have potential power that you disagree with them, or even more critical than that, right? And so I feel like it was also in the context of our listening session where we didn't get a lot of the deeper held beliefs in that session. So I just want to reiterate to our law enforcement friends the importance of listening to the commissioners with the intent to learn and understand the perspective. And maybe having been in law enforcement for 25 years myself, I was still surprised to hear the depth of the fear and the anxiety that some members of the commission had. And I've been retired 4 years. So just know, listen to learn, and listen with that sensitivity and that understanding that you all have a perception of how you interact with the community. The community has a perception of you all, and we want to get to that to improve the services. But that it can be hard to tell that. So if we soften and listen to learn, I think that can be hugely valuable. I don't want to overcoach you on how to do your jobs, but that was a theme that really came through in that other meeting, and I just wanted to reiterate it here. I am glad you're here. I think it's important to hear your voice. I think as we look to make recommendations about your department and the jobs that you do, that you have a say in that and you participate and see the process, I think that's critical. But just know that sensitivity on that other piece too, that some people will voice and some people won't. It's present.
Thank you. Commissioner Kaili, Commissioner Sugapamawa, Commissioner Suarez, Romero, Davis, anyone, please feel free.
Well, I would just say welcome to the officers. We are delighted to be able to work with you, and together we can come up with some positive recommendations. So welcome.
I'd also like to just say welcome to the officers. I think working together with law enforcement makes the most sense if we're gonna really affect change and get the positive outcome that we're looking for. And so welcome, we appreciate your input, and we're glad to have you guys aboard.
And maybe I'll say this before anybody else wants to jump in. I just want to emphasize, one, that the work of the commission is about race and the impacts and outcomes for communities of color in Salt Lake City, and also outcomes and impacts internally on officers of color. And there is no accusation, assumption, or anything else that each and every officer in Salt Lake City is a racist. Our focus is on the institutional impacts to communities of color and officers of color. And equity isn't concerned with intentions, it's concerned with outcomes. And so our focus is on the outcomes. So as we continue to ask for data from Salt Lake City PD, that's what we look at to determine those outcomes and impacts. And so, you know, an entity can describe itself as racially neutral or racially phenomenal, but we look at the outcomes to determine if that's in fact true. And so I just think that's necessary to clarify, because some of the officers that we've spoken with, and as many cops as I know, often feel accused of something, of being a racist. And, you know, we can look at other cities and states and what's going on there, but that's not what the work is here. It's really to look at the institutional aspects and outcomes on committees of color and officers of color specifically. Any other thoughts before we move into the agenda? I also see Officer Masters has arrived, and so would offer you the space to introduce yourself, tell us your interest in the commission, and specifically maybe the training committee.
Yeah, thanks, Dante. I've been involved with the field training program in the Salt Lake City Police Department for about 4 years now. And during that same time, I've also been involved with adjunct in the defensive tactics for the police department and less lethal shotguns, a variety of other training aspects within our department. So training's very near and dear to my heart. And that's why I wanted to be involved with this subcommittee here.
Thank you. And it's Sergeant Masters, I believe, right? So thank you, Sergeant.
Well, I'm just an officer for now, my friend.
Okay, I'll get you promoted. The chief's on the call, so that'll work. So, all right, any other thoughts for the officers before we move into the agenda? All right, thank you. So just to start out with, any report from the youth committee relevant to the training work? Commissioner Rogelio or Prospero?
Hey, Rogelio, did you guys talk about your recruitment for trying to make those listening sessions happen? Oh, Rogelio just on, but he's not on.
So we'll get back to it.
So yeah, they've been working on trying to get some listening sessions, used specifically, and also one just in general for those who have interacted with law enforcement, both positive and negative, as well as just in general, get some feedback of what youth meaning high school to like college age level, what their thoughts are about police reform and so forth. So they're in the process of doing that. Oh, Rogelio, are you back?
He's unmuted.
No. All right. So yeah, that's where they're at. I don't know if
Okay.
they have anything else going on.
Thank you. Okay. And so then just a quick follow-up on the safety briefing and the partner pair availability that the chief has offered. And there was a mix-up in getting the information out to all the commissioners. So it did get sent, but there was some confusion as to which officers were going to be on the committees, which officers were going to be in the partner pair. So Colette is redoing that process and we'll be sending it out once again. So you'll be able to sign up both for the a time and day for the safety briefing, and also if you're interested in doing the partner pair program with an officer. So that'll be coming to you very soon.
Dante, can you remind me what the safety briefing is? I don't recall that.
Yeah, some of this occurred after the conversation around some folks had been doxxed and all their information released and that kind of thing. And so there was a concern about how do I ensure that I'm as safe as I can possibly be, certainly given the work of the commission and some of the work that the individual commissioners do. So the chief said he could provide safety briefings to any commissioners that wanted that. Just besides keep your head on a swivel, what else can I do? Right. Okay. Just want to maybe a final point to the recommendations that were fully approved by the commission last meeting. And so I'm going to check with the representative from the city council and the mayor's office to see how they want them presented and submitted. Typically, at this point, we attend a meeting of one of the work groups of the council, but that's not a presentation to the entire council, which I think this needs to be. And I also think a subcommittee member is who should present that. The same to the mayor. So like I said, I'm going to kind of draft up a cover letter for that on how we got to those recommendations. But would love to have one of the committee members do that presentation once I learn how council wants it presented, as well as to the mayor's office. So I will take.
Yeah, I'm willing to make that presentation to the council, at least for the first set of recommendations. So once you find out, if you can kind of let me know, and then we can figure out how to do it.
Thank you, Reverend. And I actually think it would be good to have at least 2 commissioners doing that presentation. So if anyone else would like to volunteer, that would be great. Or we can do the voluntold process, whichever works best.
Hey, man, I'm out of the Marine Corps. I don't got that stuff no more, man. What type of date and time are we talking about?
I don't know. I don't know. So usually the work groups.
Is it during the city
afternoon.
council?
I would assume so. Usually the work groups meet in the afternoon, but I would assume
2 to 5, I
it's
think.
the council. Yeah, so I'll double check that and find out.
Yeah, depending on time, I'd join the Reverend if he'd have me.
Okay.
Riff-raff like me.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So I'll find out and get back with you and let you know on that process. And just, I would just pause. I don't know if any of the officers had a chance to read the recommendations that got sent to them. What I would love to hear, I think it would be informative to hear your thoughts on those recommendations. And if you haven't had a chance to read them, that's fine too.
I don't have anything right away, Dante. I've been trying to scroll over it in the last 10 minutes.
Sure. Okay.
Jose?
Yeah, sure.
No, same thing. I'm here at training as well, so I've been trying to do some of the training as well as scroll over all the stuff that's been sent out today.
Okay. Okay. One group of recommendations was specific to the FTO program and doing targeted outreach to increase the number of officers of color that are members of the FTO program. Currently out of 67, there's 4. Another was a recommendation for the training division specifically, or training content in the academy, to increase the number of hours related to diversity, equity, and inclusion with trainers who are community-based trainers, and also provide some level of understanding history content around the communities of color in Salt Lake City, so officers know or have a better understanding of the history of the communities that they're policing. So those were just 2 very specific ones, and then others around CIT and improving, the budget for CIT. And also there was recommendations to increase funding for training so that there could be that additional training, as I mentioned, in CIT budget, so there could be more detectives on the road at any given time, and possibly to increase the shifts that they're working in conjunction with the social workers. So I think that was the general gist of them. Anything I missed? I don't have them right in front of me, so.
No, and so if I can say something.
Yep.
As far as the training aspect and giving more funding to them, get more detectives, I totally agree with that. I think that's something that's necessary. We kind of briefly touched about the FTO program. And right now, so we just barely had a class of 19 that finished their training today. And out of those 19, it's a lot of it is just trying to talk people, even, it doesn't matter right now about race or anything like that, or what minority group they belong to. It's just, we're having a hard time as it is maintaining FTOs quality FTOs that are able to actually do proper instruction and teach officers how they should be officers. So I don't know what else we can further do to attract other groups of minorities, and other than do the whole voluntold. But then you go, it's being an FTO is kind of something. It's so they give us an extra 2 hours of overtime to go ahead and do all the administrative stuff. Because obviously you're staying after every shift, you have to do your daily observation reports. But so it takes a good toll on you having to recruit with you for 3 weeks and so forth and so on. So you got to have the desire to want to teach and be an influential person on that individual's career. And that's just my whole thing. It's we're already having a hard time getting certain FTOs, which are great individuals. They are great officers. We can't even get them to join. So I don't know what else we can do to attract other FTOs that really don't have the desire or the means to be an FTO.
We need to pay you more.
Okay, sign me up.
Yeah, I do agree with that too. But then, yeah, so that's one of the fixes. But at the same time, what all can we really achieve with that? Because once again, you start throwing money at things, and at that point in time, you're just going to have people jumping to do it just for the money and not the actual reason of what an FTO should be. You're there to teach officers how to be officers. And I surely don't do it for the money, that's for sure. And I don't think it influenced the way I do things, even if I did get paid more. So I don't know what else we can do as far as attracting other, like I said, right now, we just need more FTOs, period. Because there's some that are going. I think the last rotation there wasn't that many. It was a pretty big class. I think I went 7 weeks, just one right after the other. And with me, they only do 1 week rotation on bikes. So other FTOs, they had someone with them to 12 weeks, and it takes a toll on you after a while.
Yeah, Jose, it's Steve Andrew here. I appreciate your comments, and being a former professional standards commander where I managed the FTO program for the Unified Police Department. I really empathize with the challenge to motivate trainers to want to be a part of that work, and then to keep them doing it, as you alluded to at the end there. There's so much time with someone else in your car, and that emotional energy to continue to train for the benefit of the department. Sometimes you just want to ride in your car by yourself and do your job, right? And so I get that. I hear what you're saying. And I would add that, after a hiring freeze, and hopefully there's going to be quite a bit of hiring in the department, that would potentially exacerbate that problem, right? Where you're going to have recruitment after recruitment after recruitment. But I think that those point to all the more reason to be intentional about targeting and promoting the program and reaching out to trainers of color to motivate and show the value for the department, for purposes of diversity, for service to the community. If we're not intentional about making the changes won't be made. So I support our recommendation about continuing to attempt to recruit and intentionally trying to recruit officers who are BIPOC to help promote that program. I hear you with the challenges, but I don't think we want to let the challenges get in the way with making the recommendations to make the effort. So we've got to put that invitation out there and put that effort. And then I think there's a bigger picture issue beyond just the nuts and bolts of getting trainers, and it's how do we present and professionalize the police department the way we're perceived by the community to ensure that we're maximizing every opportunity that we can. So there's the functional level, and I hear you, and I agree with some of the challenges, and we have to be creative in how we overcome them. There's also that bigger picture about the messaging and the kind of department that we want to be in the long run, and making those a priority that I think went into these recommendations. I hope I didn't cut you off, Dante. If I did, I apologize.
No, thank you.
And I would certainly agree that to be intentional about this process is going to be critical. And so while I realize that there'll be obstacles and there'll be those who will object, we really need to be as intentional as we can. And if we can start the intentional at the highest level, then I think we can get where we're trying to go.
Yeah, I feel for Jose because he's talking about recruitment, and recruitment is probably one of the skills that I have none of. I'm terrible at marketing, terrible at recruiting. But instead of saying, "Hey, Jose, you're an FTO, come on, man, bring us some diversity," I would prefer to think that as a commission also assist in what is the best practice, what have other organizations done to be able to increase that diversity, because you're doing your FTO work. I don't know if it's necessarily on you to come up with ways to recruit a more diverse FTO group there. Surely to support it. It sounds like you would support it. It sounds like you'd say, no problem, man. I'd be part of that, but I don't know how to do it. So for us to give you some of that support, hey, this is how this other police department, this other sheriff's office, they this is the way they did it. And then, provide that support for you guys. Okay, we could try that out. But for sure, that intentionality's got to be there. And that's got to, hopefully the executiveship of PD here will support that, and then try these different ways of trying to increase that diversity. Because like my brothers, they were engineers. They are engineers, and when they went to engineering, there was no women at all in their school. And then they'd go work for IBM and Exxon, and there's all men then still too. And so not until they made that effort, they brought into their marketing, we got to bring women in. Oh, you know what? We also got to bring minorities. And by bringing all that diversity, all of a sudden, all these great ideas start popping up. So I think that we also need to support Jose and all the FTOs on how do you recruit, not just say, go do it, guys.
And that's kind of what I was kind of hitting at, is we can bring up these ideas, but we also come with not just present an idea, but how are we going to get there? We're more than glad to accept more FTOs, because even some of us FTOs, once we see an officer who's does a really good job on their own, we think they should be teaching other recruits, other officers in training. You go ahead and approach them like, hey, you know what? You should really think, or you should really consider about becoming an FTO. Why don't you put in, or why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Because you obviously, like any other job, which ones are the good ones, which ones are the okay ones, and hey, you should really go with that FTO or this and that. So we're constantly trying to attract good officers to come and be field training officers, but it kind of comes to that problem of how are we going to do it if we're already exhausting every possible avenue that we have so far to try and attract others to kind of join the program.
I just would like to encourage the officers that are here and participating that this commission has opened up avenues that haven't been available to us. At some point, and I say this to the commissioners, we tried to make FTO a rank, because in government you can't just give out bonuses, so you have to make it a rank or a pay. And I was halfway joking about pay, but in reality, a rank with pay accompanying, right? And that we just couldn't do that with the budget that we had, but it was an attractor. Our FTOs wanted that rank, and I think they still do, because that would go towards their retirement, that pay. So those are some of the things we've tried to do in the past. We just haven't had the ability to do it, but with the commission support and looking at those different options, that's why I'm so optimistic about working with the commission. Now I'll shut up. Sorry.
No, thank you, Chief. And appreciate the conversation and the comments. And maybe I'll just say this, is that honestly, for the most part, diversity does not happen by accident. So to Commissioner Angiordan's point, there needs to be intentionality. And that's not to say, Officer Munoz, that you have not been intentional. But the question is, how has there been a strategic approach to intentionality? And I think that's what we're really talking about, is that laying out a strategic approach to being intentional about improving the diversity of the FTO program, of who's in the training division, of what SWAT looks like, of what K9 looks like, of what the specialty units look like. There needs to be an intentional approach and a strategic approach, or else you're just playing hopscotch and there's no real way of knowing and ensuring that you're going to succeed in what it is that you're trying to do. So hope that all of this helps a little bit in understanding. We know you're working hard and trying to increase not just the diversity of the program, but just the program itself and get officers in there. So how do we create some strategic approach to be intentional about ensuring that we are really letting it be known that we want officers of color in the FTO program, and what does that look like?
In case I missed it.
And just to add to that, Dante, one of the things I was thinking of, and thank you officers for your feedback, is really looking at what was mentioned here with quality officers. And we know that we have a lot of quality people who are diverse and of color, and really looking at why are they not wanting to go into this, right? So what's holding them back, or why are they choosing not to, and really look at the structure and the environment and culture within that, if it is inclusive of all of these other individuals.
Thank you.
Sorry, Steve, I didn't cut you off.
Your comments were way more valuable than mine. Thanks for throwing them out. I was just going to say thanks to Jose, because I know how hard it is to be a trainer, and particularly when FTOs get thin and you constantly have someone with you, it's a grind, and it makes doing the job harder. So thanks for your sustained commitment and your comments. I hope you understand. I hope everyone understands that we're not here to shout down your ideas, but to share perspective. And I really appreciate you coming forward with those ideas.
Yeah. All right, great. Any other thoughts on any of the other recommendations before we move on? All right, thank you. This committee had said that it now wants to step into the recruitment and hiring process. And so I sent out just this morning, so it's not like I expected everybody to have had a chance to read it, but sent out the 2020 recruitment plan that Salt Lake City PD has in place. Did anybody have a chance to take a look at that? We can do just a brief conversation and maybe come back around to it next meeting, but I think it's worth taking a look at just briefly. A couple things. Oh, go ahead.
I did have a question on, I don't know if anybody can answer this. They're talking about having the lead recruiter, basically somebody from communications and media relations. Is this a new position or a new task they're giving this person? I was just wondering, or is this something that's always been ongoing, or is it because recently, oh, you know what, we've lost our competitive edge with other police departments, sheriff's offices, that we need to bring this new person in or add more responsibilities? That's what I was just wondering. Would you know, Chief Dow?
So I can answer that one for you, Moises.
Yeah.
So like I said, I'm a collateral recruiter as well for the department. And right now, Greg Wilking, he's in the PR division. He's the one that is kind of heading up the recruiting and stuff. And it is just an additional task. They didn't get no additional bodies or anything else. So he's trying to do that on top of all the media and everything else.
That exactly answered my question. Chief, were you going to say something?
Well, we have lessened his workload in PR to take on additional duties, but that's not an additional position.
It's just an add-on to what he was doing. Gotcha.
Okay, thank
you. Just a couple things of note in this that kind of struck me was that and maybe not surprisingly so, on average, 50% of candidates do not pass the background process. And there's a million reasons why that might be, all certainly valid. But what I've also seen and I don't know the background process here, which is why I'd like to have a conversation with the background investigator. But some departments used to, or still do, evaluate how many police contacts someone who's applied. And we know that Black and brown communities have many more contacts in general than do white applicants. And so how does that impact, if in fact that is an evaluative criteria? And again, I don't know. So I think what we need to take a look at is what the background investigation criteria and evaluative process is. And so I think that would be an ask from this committee, is to take a look at the background process. Also, a lot of departments have, in the last few years, lessened the requirement around marijuana and cannabis. So it's, 5 years or farther away, which still may be a long time, versus 2 years or farther away from the last time you smoked weed. I mean, you're never going to get you can do meth 30 years ago and you're not getting on the department. But at what point is that evaluated within the process? And again, those are just, I think, some of the questions that we could find out. I think the good thing that they've done is recognize that just having a quarterly or biannual hiring approach and process doesn't work. And so it's an ongoing process. So there's always your ability to apply for a position. I went just to see if I could see what the application looked like, but I've got to go through and go through the whole process of putting emails and sign up, and so I didn't. So maybe I'll see if we can actually take a look at the application itself, just to see what those questions are as they go through that. And stop me anytime if some of you have answers or other questions. I'm just kind of going through.
No, Dante, I think that's a really good, when I saw that 50%,
Yep.
that's amazing. And I don't know if that's normal or high or low. I mean, I have no idea. And to see, and I have heard complaints, folks, including people from PD, that we're losing a lot of good people, but because of this process, well, sure, I think that person would have been a great officer, but because of this, they got axed. And so again, this is just people talking. I don't know what the data looks like. I don't know what the process is, but I think that's a great conversation. Jose, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, so one thing to take into account with everything is, especially like the background and stuff, a lot of it mirrors kind of what the state standards are as far as post is, because you fill out a background application with the department to get hired on. Then in order to receive your certifications to be a certified police officer in the state of Utah, you need to also do a background post packet. And so they kind of go off of their standard, because it'd be one thing for us to lower our standards, hire people, then in order to be certified as a Utah peace officer, you need to go through post and pass their background investigations. So last understanding that I had was a lot of this requisites and a lot of the stuff that we have on our background mirrors exactly what the state does, if that makes sense.
Yeah, is that the same with laterals?
With laterals, I believe it is the same.
As far as the lateral process, most of the guys and gals coming from other agencies within the state are already certified through the post process. So it's as simple as just transferring them from one department. They get trained up on our internal policies, standards. We make sure they're up to snuff on their shooting, their use of force tactics, and then the bulk of the lateral academies is actually spent being trained in Salt Lake City policies, getting them CIT and the various other things that Salt Lake City requires above and beyond the Weaver County Sheriff's Department or West Jordan Police, whatever department they're coming from. We get them trained up, and it's they're already certified. The guys coming from out of state, people coming from out of state, they have to qualify through the post background thing and get certified through that process as well. So it's a little bit more involved for out of state laterals than it is for in-state laterals. And then Moises, to part of the reason why you see such a high number of people wash out and cheaped out can probably go into a little bit more of this. The background packet is like 25 to 35 pages long. And so when you're filling it out, and I see you laughing, and I agree with you, it's a lot of work. Simple typos and not like, oh, your spelling was off. If you put down a date on one packet saying, hey, the last time I did X or Y or Z, that may actually prohibit you if you say applied at another agency, filled out another packet, and Post takes a look at it and goes, well, they said the last time they smoked marijuana was May 5th, 2015. And then on another packet, it says the last time they smoked it was June of 2015. So now there's a discrepancy now. That's not as common as simple integrity violations, right? Where people are going and making claims about their honesty or their integrity, either whether unintentionally or intentionally, trying to make themselves look better. That's one of those things that disqualifies a lot of people who come and apply is integrity violations, because you don't want an officer on the street who's not going to have integrity and not have the honesty to be an officer, because that further erodes public trust, especially in a time when we are struggling to regain a lot of that. So when you see those numbers, it's not necessarily that we're washing people out for fun to try and be more exclusive. We're not an Ivy League college where we're washing people out because it makes us better. It's because people their applicants, or they're making mistakes, or they're not being honest.
No, thank you. And so again, I think it would be helpful to get as much information from the background investigator and see the application and all of those things, so we can just put an equity lens on that, if you will, to see what it looks like. Again, just kind of going through my thoughts on the document that I went through fairly quickly. Under recruitment objectives, I just thought it was interesting, since we've had this conversation about targeted recruitment as an FTO and other departments. Recruitment objectives are: the department will focus on diversity and equal opportunity in all positions at the police department as it relates to recruitment from outside to in. So why would that not also be a similar objective inside as well? That's just my own not so humble opinion, I guess. It speaks to, and Moises, you had the question, the lead recruiter and what they're responsible for. It says that they're responsible for following a recruiting plan and coordinating outreach efforts, and just would love to see what that looked like. If in fact there was a plan that, given it's an add-on to his position, what has been able to be accomplished or at least put together. Advertising and marketing, it's pretty standard. Industry job sites, Nextdoor, Twitter, Facebook, but there was nothing specific about, NOBLE, National Organization for Black Law Enforcement, or different organizations that are specifically designed to focus on either, officers of color, or HBCUs, or historically Hispanic serving organizations, universities and colleges, things like that. Internally, it mentions, all the colleges and universities in the state. How is it focusing? Does it focus on student organizations of color? Things like that. So those are just kind of broad questions I think we can certainly speak to. I thought it was interesting that it says under recruitment evaluation that each academy curriculum will be evaluated annually to improve on latest information and techniques. And then each academy class will conduct a debriefing to evaluate the recruiting process and the curriculum of the class. So it might be some interesting information to gather, should that have been, assuming that was done and has been done. So just some general thoughts in this document, which is the recruiting plan for Salt Lake City Police Department. But I would encourage you to take a look at it if you haven't had a chance, or look at it a little bit more in depth and just see some thoughts or questions that you might have, that we can begin to, again, ask for information like what's the criteria in the background, what does the application look like, things like that. So I'll just pause and see if there's any just thoughts. Maybe some of you have had a chance to dive into that. Just your thoughts.
Dante, I like the idea of really focusing on those failed backgrounds. So I spent 25 years also with Unified Police Department, and actually almost did get hired through my background because I didn't dot some of those T's. And my background board actually was probably mostly white men with probably 20 years of experience. So that's a big difference to see, like, there's so many things in our social world that change over time. And I met all the qualifications through post, but I wasn't like their perfect candidate. So luckily I scored high enough in the other areas that they couldn't wash me out, and was able to get a 25-year career out of that. So, and then also really targeting those diverse communities. You have to get out on the street, really. You can't just depend on social media and newspapers, and you just have to get out there. So, I like the other one that I thought would be good to look at was the experience that they're looking for, not just military, but maybe perhaps focus more on education, working with the public, things like that.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And some of our goal is to change culture of department. And I think if we look at the ways that we're asking people and the folks that we continue to ask to be a part of the department as they're coming in, can be a real push for that. Lieutenant Suarez is being modest. She was the HR sergeant and did hiring and recruitment for a number of years. So she's actually an expert in this, but it's maybe too polite to say it. So I'm just going to call that out. And I know that some work that we used to do in Unified, and I'm curious, Salt Lake City has something similar or a partnership, is with the Commission on Diversity Affairs that Salt Lake County had, that hosted community seminars. So they had access to and relationships with community leaders from various BIPOC communities, and would intentionally go out and recruit and teach members of those communities what it takes to be a law enforcement officer. So if you have a young person that wants to be a cop, and you tell them this is the background check or part of the background check that you're going to go through if you have this goal to be a police officer, you need to be aware they're going to be asking these questions, which can help them manage their behavioral issues. Or I know we're talking about weed or whatever, some of those things that prohibit you from being involved in law enforcement. If they have that long-term goal and know what some of those expectations are, they're more likely to be able to be part of it. And I can actually see a real relationship between this commission and communities, inviting community members to be a part of the department as we continue to build trust and relationships, so that members of the community know it's a department that they can, in good faith, give a recommendation to fellow community members to be a part of. Because that can be a challenge in recruiting members of BIPOC communities, is the pressure that they have from their own community to not be part of a law enforcement agency, right? So we have to build that trust to overcome that. And then I'm gonna go back to the drum that I keep, I'm gonna go back to the point that I keep making on this, and it's really want to look at those questions that are asked in those interviews, like Lieutenant Suarez said, and behavioral questions and those scenario questions, to make sure that we aren't unintentionally creating additional barriers for racially and ethnically diverse communities who we actually get to apply, because that's a challenge. And then if we unintentionally create additional barriers, it's just not fair, and we're just getting in our own way to do it. So I think as we drill down into this plan and look at it through that equity lens, there's a lot of areas that we could contribute, while understanding, as Jose mentioned, and Officer Masters, there are factors outside of Salt Lake City that regulate that, and that's we just have to work within those. But there's things that we can do within the department too.
And if I could just add to that, one thing that always frustrated me was we would put the people who were applying through the testing process, and they because we had civil service, they got scored. And those scores were so tight, sometimes within 1/100th of a point, right? And then who do we get to apply a lot for police departments? Ex-military, and a lot of those are male whites.
Yep.
And so they come in with those very, very small points that we're putting on that list. And then they get their military points, and someone who was number 80 is now number 2. And 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And because civil service required us to hire them in order, that always frustrated me. And so I was really excited to get, when we got rid of civil service, and we're in the midst of writing those hiring rules. And I'm pretty sure that, well, I know we are, we're gonna be able to hire 1 out of the top 20. When we have an opening, we can take any of the top 20.
Yep.
And so I think that's going to help us out a lot there.
That's great. And to Commissioner Suarez's point about, the interview process, and I know you've heard me say this numerous times, and to Commissioner Angieri's point, the questions matter, because the questions shouldn't be necessarily about strategy and tactics, because you're going to learn that in the academy. But the questions can be more about who are you as a human being? What is your understanding of the communities that you're going to serve? What's your philosophy of those types of questions? And that doesn't take a panel of police officers to do. So I've seen and helped to have community members who are on those panels, and the outcomes have absolutely shown to be different. And so, and I don't know what the process is in Salt Lake City, so I think it also would be important, and I know somebody's got the whole grid up on a map on a wall somewhere of application through hiring, and what that process looks like, and the timelines of when you got to do your PT tests and get your psych eval and everything else. And so I think it would be helpful just to see that overall process, but then see how and where we can offer thoughts on equitable engagement within that process.
I really like Marianne's statement. Mariana, you hit it for me. And I'm not anti-military, and I think 8 years as an infantry machine gunner, I thought great experience. I'm not sure it really prepared me to be a police officer. But I probably would have adjusted. Like I think Munoz, I think is or was military. But man, to target those people that already have a lot of this community work in them, social workers, educators, all that. And if we're going to give points, then we'll give them points, because then we don't have to reteach that person how to work with community, right? We already know how. We know how important relationship building is, and it's going out there when I get out of my patrol car and saying hi to the person that just walked out that 7-Eleven. Hey, how's it going? Like that cup of coffee. The research supports that. Hotspot policing is based on that type of work, that everyday work where that legitimacy of police starts kicking in. The own community starts saying, you know what? Steve Angieri over there in the corner, he's selling that dope. And so all of a sudden, you got the community working for you instead of against you. And I remember we implemented out there in Magna and Kearns, and boy, hey Steve, didn't you see your officer all of a sudden getting that benefit? And it's because they already started to know that, wow, you know what? We work with community. That's the norm. Build those relationships. It comes back at you, and they help you out rather than hiding that criminal that's trying to run away and trying to hide that gun. And that's a lot of the places we work at. That's the norm. So I would love it if recruitment could look at these other social work, education types, personalities that come in already doing community policing, because community policing is a philosophy, right? It's not 3 or 4 COP folks going out to community events. It's a philosophy within an institution. So thanks, Marianne, for bringing that up.
Yeah, totally. And some of those officers were good, just natural at talking, and others needed a lot of coaching to get there. And that can be a skill we need to build, that we need to proactively build. But if we're recruiting for it as one of the intentional skills of law enforcement, I think there's a lot of value in that.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts on what might be helpful information-wise to gather on the recruitment or hiring process?
I know we have that hiring process timeline. I just have to get it to you.
Okay. And I know you're not going to hand out the questions, but would love to know what kind of the process is, or how community can be involved in the process, or where in the process there might be an opportunity for non-police officers to be engaged in the process.
There is opportunity, and you'll see it when we get you that spreadsheet.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Other thoughts on information that might be helpful for you?
I just need to read it more, Dante, and I really would like for the officers that are available right now today is to, if they could, read up on that and then give us their feedback too, because I'm sure they want some more folks come into PD to give them some relief as well. So, and I'm sure Steve's going to read up and give us a full breakdown next time.
Before we switch out of hiring recruitment, I know Chief Dowdy before said that the incoming class is probably one of the more diverse classes that has been had. And so he's got the data, so he was going to be able to share that with us. So I'll just ask him to stick it up on the screen so we can see it.
Muted, Chief.
Sorry about that. These are the 30 that we interviewed for hire. We offered all 30 a job. One of them withdrew, and he is a white male. So really, there's only 29 that will be starting on Monday. But this is the demographic breakdown of that class.
Okay, so out of 29, there will be 10 people of color then, as I look at this correctly?
That's correct.
And 3 female?
What's that?
And three women?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So thoughts, questions on just this piece of data? One, kudos and congratulations for the recruitment and the recruiters diversifying the class.
And I would just like to say that this is a great start toward where we are trying to get with equity in terms of the police department. And so to have a diverse class that represents 10 out of the 29 is just fantastic. So thank you to the chief and everybody else for the work that they've done.
Chief, was there any targeted outreach? Is there a reason why we're seeing it be more diverse than normally?
I have to say, I don't think so. So I think this is just luck. Because of COVID, we weren't doing any outreach. And I'm not sure we were doing the right type of outreach before that. So I would have to say no.
Thanks for that honesty.
Chief, do you, when you get folks in that you're interviewing, I mean, do you ask them how they found out about the opportunity and or what persuaded them to, go forward? I mean, do you get any intel on kind of what tripped the trigger for them to get activated?
I'm not sure what the recruiters or the onboarding people with the city asked them. I know I have the opportunity to interview them. That's their last step, is the interview with the chief. So it's either the chief or one of the deputies or assistant chiefs that we interview them. And that is one of the questions we ask them is, why do you want to work here? And how did you find out about it? And almost all of them say it's because either, well, one of two things: you pay the most, or one of the most, and you're the biggest, so there's a lot of opportunity.
Meaning statewide pay the most?
Yeah. Well, they said one of the highest paid in the state, and you're one of the biggest, so there's a lot of opportunity to move around and do different things. Those are the two main reasons people come and work for us when we ask them that question. And then, when we ask them, how did you find out about it? They just said, well, my friends work here, or I saw your web page or something.
Right.
most of them just have friends or acquaintances. And a lot of them have applied other places and just haven't been able to get hired yet. That happens with a lot of people. They're just, law enforcement is really competitive to get into. I know I had to apply for 3 different places before I got hired by Salt Lake. So it's just a really competitive area to get into. When 1,000 people apply for 10 spots,
Wow.
it gets competitive.
And I'm just curious whether you know anything about out-of-state folks, meaning, do you find that you are seeing applicants from particular other cities that see Salt Lake as a step up, but they're from outside of Utah, or maybe they want to work in a similarly sized city that has a better crime rate? Or
I think most of the time when we've had out-of-state candidates that I've interviewed, it's because they have family or friends here and have visited and have wanted to come work here. And that was the same with me. I visited here, wanted to come back and live here. So that's the reason why. One unique thing is I met with our deputy chief who's over recruiting last week, and this next class for July that we're doing right now, that's open for recruiting right now, they've had a significantly higher portion of out-of-state candidates want to be, have expressed interest, and I'm not sure why that's happening.
So if I can add something as well.
Please.
So I'm also a collateral explorer advisor, and in there, that's one of the most, if not the most diverse department within Salt Lake City. We have a lot of Hispanics, a lot of African Americans. Everything possible is part of the Explorer program. In this next academy class, we were able to get 4 explorers hired on, with one being an African American female, another female Hispanic, and I think the other 2 males were Hispanic as well. So that's one of the ways we are trying to, I guess, diversify the department a lot more, is get some of the explorers that we have had in the program for a while, try and get them hired on, try and do whatever we can to make sure they get into the police force, because that is their passion. That is what they really want to do. So we're trying to use explorers almost as a pipeline into the police department eventually once they turn 21.
And we do give explorers preference points, similar to veterans, but not as many points.
Yeah, no, thank you. And we have heard that in the past, that the Explorer program is an extremely diverse group of folks, which is great. And I'm curious, maybe this is just my curiosity, what percentage of recruits come in who have a college background versus just a high school diploma? Because all you really need is a high school diploma, correct?
That's correct. I'm sure HR actually has the specifics on that. And we could probably get that. Off the top of my head, though, I would say most probably come in with a high school diploma. Some do with a degree. But there are a lot of officers who complete their degrees with city assistants in their first few years of employment.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of my questions too, Chief. If there was some kind of tuition reimbursement, or if you go to school, we'll pay for it or stuff like that. Because the literature is showing that officers with higher education less likely to have bad incidents, basically.
Yeah, the city pays as much as the federal government allows for reimbursement. And I know I completely might agree with city reimbursement. So a lot of officers take advantage of that. And even if we're advanced degrees as well, we have several people who are going for doctorates right now as well.
Yeah, well, DeTola just came in, and I hear he's one of those snobby PhD folks.
All right. Well, good. As we then kind of wind down, just want to check in. We've offered our recommendations on the academy itself, although one of the recommendations was increase the diversity of the in-service, or the work of the in-service as it relates to equity and diversity training. But I just don't want to leave completely the academy and the training component to just focus on hiring. So just want to see thoughts on the in-training process. I don't know that there is a schedule yet. Maybe Chief or someone you can just tell us yes or no, if there's already a schedule of in-service trainings. And I know it's hard given COVID and everything else, as well as just lack of FTEs that you need to keep folks on the street. But that the content of the in-service, what do the scenario-based trainings look like? I think would be informative as we took a look at some of those. But that's just a offer of something to think about, remaining in training components as we do looking at the recruitment and hiring as well. So just ask your thoughts, commissioners, on in-service and that work, or is there something else around training that you see we could continue to focus on?
I can offer a suggestion to the commission, if that's all right.
Sure.
Maybe look at the percentage or ratio of skill certifications that are required versus higher education that would help us be better police officers. Because we get 40 hours a year, but 30 of it's taken up with certifying with your taser, your firearm, your baton, your defensive tactics. And so very little of what's left over can we offer valuable training, not just a certification training.
No, and I appreciate that, Chief. You know, and certainly the 40 hours and the 30 required is the floor, not the ceiling. So how can we assist or make recommendations on increasing the budget so you can add to that type of training that you're describing? You know, because an opportunity to have 1 hour of scenario-based training every half a year doesn't really become digested in the part of how you do what you do, I would suggest. And so how can we really support that work?
Chief, do you mean that the skills-based is different than the scenario-based?
So what happens is we have what we call trimester training. And trimester training is like it sounds, we train the whole department 3 times per year. That comes out to about 36 hours, and then there's some electives that they can do to get their 40 that's required by the state. And then we have reality-based training, which is the scenario-based. Part of that's in the 40 hours, but then we actually offer them a little bit more of that. So they're not just getting their 40, they may get 50 or 60, but a lot of that basic 40 is just taken up with all those certifications that we have to do every year. And so I'm not saying it's 30 hours, but it's quite a big number, a big ratio.
But that certification is required?
It's required by the department.
But not by the state.
I'm not sure what the state requires. They require 40 hours of training, but I don't think they require 40 hours of defensive tactics training.
Okay.
If you understand what I'm saying.
Now I understand what you're saying. I'm a little slow.
And I think to the point a little bit is that the scenario-based trainings can be a shooting scenario, can be a taser, can be, you know, a carjacking scenario, but how much of that is around community engagement? Are there scenarios around community engagement? And what I'm hearing the chief say is not very much. Yeah. So,
and so then it could be a lot more de-escalation, or,
Yeah.
or the whole gamut, right? From de-escalation,
right.
crisis management to the ultimate.
Right.
But you could, you know, continually practice and be able to work on those cues. And okay.
Yeah.
And some of those certifications, I want to speak for you, Chief, but they're industry standard best practices to have those certifications in place for liability reduction. So if we were to try to take a look at how much time could be saved through the certification process, it's a big conversation with legal and whatever that comfort zone is. Yeah, but I just want to reiterate what Dante said too, and I know it's a funding issue, and I know you have human resource challenges right now, but I think if we could improve that training and specifically look for training that augments and supports the policies that we're putting into place. So not only are we giving recommendations for policies and practices for the department, but ensuring that the officers really understand that at a deeper level, more than just reading it on the paper. And I feel like that would take well above the few free hours that the chief is talking about, which I'm not ready to make a recommendation, but we might want to be thoughtful about giving recommendations about additional trainings, what we would see as a priority, and ways to achieve that. Maybe a funding recommendation, ways to achieve it.
Let me just give you an example, and this is just me speaking, so I'm not speaking for the department right now. We certify on our firearms 3 times a year. One is a duty qualification, one is a light duty, a low light qualification, and one is an off duty qualification. Now, do I think we need to have a certification? Yeah, probably legally we do to be defensible in court. But do we need to have a low light qualification when we know we're going to train our people to shoot that way? Do we really need to have them qualify that way? Do we really need to have an off duty concealed carry qualification? Yeah, we're going to teach them how to do that. We need to teach them that, but do we really need to have a certification for it? Those are the questions I've always asked, and this is maybe the questions that the commission could ask.
Thank you, Chief. And maybe I'll give another example. I was doing an evaluation of in-service trainings for a department, and there were 4 in-service sessions, that scenario-based trainings that they had in their in-service process. 2 were shootings, 1 was taser, and 1 was a community engagement mental health scenario. And of those 4, 3 were graded and 1 wasn't. And I bet you can guess which one wasn't graded. The community mental health scenario, which is something cops do every damn day, but most cops will never pull their weapon in their entire career. So, I mean, it's just out of balance. And so how do we balance, I think, to somebody's point about really what we're trying to do, which is create better engagement and outcomes for community. But, you do what you train. If you don't train it, you're flying by the seat of your pants. And so how do we ensure that training is really what will create the best outcomes on both sides, right? You want the cops to be comfortable in engaging in that scenario, and you want the best outcomes for the community. And so how do we ensure and provide support for that to happen? So thanks, Chief. That's great.
That was very enlightening, Chief. Thanks.
We're almost at time. So I want to just call your attention to something that I sent to the mayor for her to take a look at, because I thought it would be informative for her. And I'll give you the website. The website is ourmayors.org. It is the African American Mayors Association website. And they have put together what they call the Mayor's Peace Plan, and numerous mayors across the country have signed on to this. And it's a litany of different examples of what can be done. So for mayors, here's an example: Mayor's Peace Pact for community-centered policing, provide transparency, evaluate and revise policing-related contracts and policies, advocate for federal policy changes, create robust community engagement, and enact budgets that reflect community values. So the mayor was really intrigued by it, wanted to get the commission's thoughts on it. So I'll email it out so you don't have to remember what I just said. But I would certainly encourage you before the next meeting to take a look at that and consider what you think of it and whether it's worthy of further thought and even maybe recommendation to the mayor to really consider signing off on something like this. So I'll send it to you. But the website is ourmayors.org, and it's the Mayor's Peace Pact is what the document is. we're at time. I just want to recognize that there was some conversation in the listening sessions and then subsequent to that in the full commission meeting about the Citizens Academy and some of the, one particular person of color who was going through it and walked out of it because of her perceptions of how it was being presented in some of the content. One of our commissioners was also there and could speak more on what that content was, but it just might be something for us to consider also as we take a look at maybe curriculum or how some of the curriculum is presented in the Citizens Academy. If we are trying to really create that relationship with community, we want to ensure that the presentation and the engagement is as good as it can possibly be, right? So just a thought maybe for next time.
Dante, before we in the school safety group, we talked about this budget issue, that if we have Matrix, which I guess is the accounting firm that's taking care of that,
right?
If we have them already doing that, do we as a commission still have to talk about it in such detail, or is our job more to talk about our recommendations? And then, they're going to have some kind of formula that's going to mix things up. Not that we're going to say, no, we're not going to touch budget at all, but is it in our purview to talk so much about budget, especially if we already have a firm taking care of that, and therefore we could just make recommendations and, figure it out kind of?
Yeah, no, and I'll just give you my opinion and would love to hear from everybody else. I don't think the commission needs to be in the weeds. Having been in several city governments, I know what that process looks like, and it's a pain in the ass. And so trying to get in the weeds is difficult. And so I would suggest that making, as we did, make broader recommendations around increased budgeting for CIT so this can happen. It's not our job to figure out, okay, if we're going to increase this, what do we need to decrease over here? We could make a broad statement to, lessen the militarization of Salt Lake City Police Department on the street. It's not our job to figure out necessarily how the line items should look. And I'll be really blunt, Matrix, I don't think has a clue how to put an equity lens on the budget, nor is it really their charge, having heard them speak last week. And so that's my thought on Matrix. They'll provide just very specific number crunching thoughts on the budget, while the commission can make broad recommendations on how something can or should be looked at. And then the mayor can evaluate that based on what the mayor is going to evaluate and use an equity lens to do. Again, that's my opinion. Other commissioners may want to be more detailed in how they do that. So I'll just see what other thoughts people have. Does that mean nobody wants to get in the weeds, or nobody knows what to say about a budget?
I think that's a great question, and I think it might be worth a conversation as a commission, because I think the same thing applies to how far down in the weeds should we get, what's appropriate on our recommendations about training reforms, and about, to our conversation earlier, what should those incentives be about recruiting FTOs, and what practices and policies are there about recruiting new members for the department. Those can be very, very intense and very labor intensive processes. So I think that there's a broader question to be asked about how detailed should our recommendations be, and then how will they be enacted, and perhaps it's with the city. I don't know the best way to do that, or what the future of our commission is like, whether those subcommittees can continue to exist to develop those, or what that future is. But I think that begs a bigger question in general. I would prefer to stay at a higher level, but with good direction about what the intended outcomes are. That's just one idea.
Thank you.
My personal thoughts are that we came into this with a job to do, which is to make recommendations for the betterment of our community and for law enforcement so that we can work together. And I think the fact is, in order for us to make these recommendations and for the recommendations to be implemented, which is to have better training and which is to have equity, there's going to be an increase in budget. And so last week, we've really focused on the word reallocate and increase in budget. And I think as a commission, we do our best job to be really thorough about the recommendations that we're going to make. And the mayor and the city council, they can work on the budget, and they can also advise us if our recommendations are realistic or not. But I really think our focus should be on making the absolute best recommendations for law enforcement and the community.
Thank you.
I would just add that our recommendations, I believe, are not to be the how-tos, but what to do. And I think we can recommend to the commission what changes they can, but the how to make those changes, I think ought not be within our purview.
Thank you.
I also agree on a focus on the recommendations. I think we should definitely be able to see, what the budget is and how it's allocated and things like that. But I think that our focus should be on being able to provide the recommendation, the best and most effective recommendation to help move this work along.
Thank you. Okay. Good conversations. I mean, I think generally the idea is provide that best recommendation, and it's not the commission's job to figure out how to implement that, because we are making the recommendations that are best serving both the police and the community, and providing recommendations for those best outcomes. And the details, they always say the devil is in the details, but then what is the equity lens that the mayor is going to put on her budget as she provides it? And I think she's still struggling with that on some level, although she certainly wants to do that. So thank you for that conversation. Okay. Any thoughts for agenda items for the next meeting, either now or certainly feel free to email me beforehand for thoughts on agenda items for next weekend, but for next meeting. But we'll continue to talk about the recruitment. We might be able to gather some information before the next meeting, that although we'll put some time on that, so everybody else has to scramble. At least from the police department has to all scramble to get us everything by the next couple of days. But we'll see what we can get maybe for the next meeting, and continue to have a conversation about the recruitment and hiring process, as well as the just the plan itself. So take the plan, mark it up, put some questions on it that you have, or some adjustments that you think would be helpful to the plan itself, and we'll go from there. Final thoughts, questions? Thank you to the officers who are here. Your engagement has been much appreciated today. I think it's been informative, and that's all we can ask. So much appreciated. Hope you felt that your voice was heard and important in this conversation, because we really do want you to believe that. We're not always going to agree, but I think the information passed on both sides will be really informative and helpful. So much appreciated. All right, so then we will see everyone next meeting, and do some homework when you get a chance. So much appreciated. Stay safe out there. See you soon.
Thank you.